Hello again, Edye Edens, KLF. I am so excited to bring you part two of our conversations with the subject matter expert, Helen Maurer, joining us again. I know we've done an intro previously, but for those who might not have caught our video on data privacy and security, just a couple points maybe about your quality management background before we dive in and talk about contracts and quality.
Sure, absolutely. So I've been in the quality management space within clinical research for quite some time across academic medical centers and then working on the sponsor side and contract research organizations.
Awesome. Well, it sets you up perfectly to talk about what we're talking about as we're diving into a series on contracts. We think about contracts, we think about, termination, choice of law, all these legal aspects that are very, very important. But having said that, from a quality and compliance perspective, what is in your contract that actually specifies not just you have to follow the rules, rather that actually specifies your quality plan or what's required of you and who's taking responsibility for
I
that?
think it's definitely a struggle
Mm.
within the contracting space. I think the most important piece is to ensure that you have a required quality management plan that is created by your clinical staff along with the sponsor, that there's an ongoing communication and collaboration with that document, and it should be delineated in your contracts because it will be definitely a area where there could be some confusion if it's
Yeah.
not there. What happens when you have an external audit? What happens if you're identified with a data issue
Right,
surrounding quality management? What do you do then? So
right.
having that within your contract is incredibly important. From the clinical perspective, having QC, QA built into your contract, also meaning having funding with your budget to make
People
sure.
like to hit these broad strokes in contracts and go like, well, we'll follow all the FDA guidelines. We'll follow the EMA. Whichever, jurisdiction you're in, right? And that's a start, but all that says is you'll follow the base rules. That doesn't actually lay out a quality management plan. That doesn't tell me how often you're going to come to my site and look at things. That doesn't give me what my expectations should be, what your expectations should be. Obviously, coming off the GCP addendum, have we done a risk analysis of what we anticipate for this study? And I think people get really caught up in this idea that a contract is very final, and that it takes a long time to negotiate, which, hey, I get it, it can. But you could always do this as an addendum or an appendix to your contract so that it can remain a living, breathing document for the life of your study and be updated in a way that doesn't require a full renegotiation of the contract terms, right? So if you go in thinking we're at risk level 3 and you find out actually this is really closer to risk level 2, if you start seeing certain trends in your data that require a different monitoring plan, you're able to go back in and do that. And I would say, IRBs and ECs, like this is what they expect you to be doing. They presume this is happening in some capacity, although they're not in a position to mandate it be in the contract. And then the second piece of this, which I want you to talk about, is the budget, because it's one thing to delineate it and get the plan in, that's its own hurdle. But if you don't have the money and the resources to do the plan, well, it's just a piece of paper at that point.
My guidance is always to have your contract reflect appropriately with your budget.
Yep.
And that if you are delineating, hours of time for quality assurance and compliance, that you have the appropriate dollars within the budget to pay for
Yep.
it. Because it's a project charge.
Yep.
And it really should be built in, and it should, they should be synced together, leaning on the FDA guidelines as the basis,
Yeah.
as you mentioned. And unfortunately, that's can be viewed as being too vague. And then where do you go? Where do you draw the line? And also, not just within the contract. What if the program you have requires a Toro, and then that's a separate document
Right.
you need to, review and make sure that it
Right.
aligns with everything else. So I think incorporating quality management
Mhm.
and funds into your contract and budget are incredibly
Critical.
important.
And in those situations that you point out, you need to have that responsibility clearly delineated, right?
Yes.
We need to, everyone needs to know this is the sponsor, this is the CRO, this is the research site. So there's no bickering. It's already been established. And you have the plan that establishes it, and you can hold accountability there, in addition to, like you said, being able to project then, okay, well, if we think it's this risk level and requires this level of monitoring, this is the cost that comes with that. Have you seen any negotiations where one party or the other, not trying to, throw shade, but there's like no quality management references in the contract, and one side is saying like, hey, come on, y'all, we got to have that, and the other side is just like, no? Like, do you see that level of resistance, or do you see the resistance more around, yeah, we'll say we'll follow the guidelines, but we're not going to hash out a plan? That seems like a lot of work.
More following the guidelines.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen where one side or the other has been adamant about not having
Yeah.
it
Me
within a
either.
contract. But
I haven't seen that in a long time, but I will say, when you push them to have a plan, and not just we'll do this kind of, we think, but like every 2 months, and sponsor will provide, or PI will do, or however it needs to be delineated, that's usually when I get a lot of pushback, and people are like, are you just trying to make the contracting process take longer, lawyer? And I'm like, no, I'm trying to make this better later on, so that everyone's real clear about who does what. And we have a game plan, and we're not flying by the seat of our pants, because that doesn't work in quality monitoring.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. I know our our watchers appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much.
Call, click, or email.